In 1998, scientists at the Weizmann Institute did something that should be impossible. They proved that the simple act of watching a particle changes how that particle behaves. Not metaphorically, literally. When you observe it, it acts like matter. When you don't, it acts like a wave. The particle knows you're watching. And here's what terrifies physicists. If observation changes reality, and observation requires consciousness, then consciousness can't be explained by the matter it's observing. Over the next 25 minutes, I'm going to show you why the observer effect is not just weird physics. It's the death of materialism. If you're the kind of person who wants to understand reality at its deepest level, you're in the right place. Make sure you're subscribed because we go deeper here than anywhere else. Now let's get into this. For 300 years, science operated on a simple assumption. Reality exists independently of anyone observing it. The moon is there whether you look at it or not. Atoms behave the same way whether measured or unmeasured. Consciousness is just what it feels like when matter reaches sufficient complexity. This worldview, called materialism, seemed obvious. It worked. It built our entire technological civilization. But then came quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics revealed something so disturbing that even physicists who use it every day struggle to accept its implications. The observer effect shows that at the quantum level, particles don't have definite properties until they're measured. Before observation, an electron exists in what's called superposition, simultaneously in multiple states at once. The moment you observe it, that superposition collapses into one definite state. This isn't a limitation of our instruments. It's not that the particle had a definite position and we just didn't know it. The particle genuinely existed in multiple states simultaneously until observation forced it to choose. Now here's why this matters to you. If the act of observation collapses quantum possibilities into actual reality, then what exactly is observation? Is it just physical interaction? If so, why does it matter whether a conscious observer is involved? And if consciousness does play a role, then consciousness can't be reduced to just another physical process, because it would be the thing that creates physical reality in the first place. Over the next minutes, we're going to explore the actual experiments that proved this, examine what physicists really say when they're being honest, and investigate what it means for you as an observer right now. This isn't philosophy. This is what the data shows. And what the data shows is impossible according to the worldview most people still hold. Let's start with the experiment that broke reality. In 1801, Thomas Young performed what's now called the double-slit experiment. He shone light through two narrow slits and observed the pattern on a screen behind them. If light were simply particles, you'd expect two bands of light, one behind each slit. Instead, he saw an interference pattern, alternating bands of light and dark, proof that light behaves as a wave. Waves from the two slits were interfering with each other, creating the pattern. This seemed to settle it. Light is a wave. But then quantum mechanics emerged, and physicists discovered light also behaves as discrete particles called photons. So they repeated Young's experiment, but this time sending one photon at a time through the slits. Here's where it gets strange. Even firing one photon at a time, with minutes between each photon, the interference pattern still built up over time. Each individual photon was somehow interfering with itself, as if it went through both slits simultaneously. The photon existed in superposition, taking both paths at once until it hit the screen and was forced to appear at one specific location. But then, scientists got more ambitious. They decided to observe which slit each photon actually went through. They placed detectors at each slit to measure the photon's path. And the moment they added observation, everything changed. The interference pattern disappeared completely. When observed, photons behaved like normal particles, going through one slit or the other. No superposition, no wave behavior, just particles. Remove the observation, the interference pattern returns. Add it back, it vanishes. The act of measurement, of observation, fundamentally changes what the particle is. This isn't a subtle effect. This is reality behaving completely differently, based purely on whether it's being watched. Physicist John Wheeler said it directly. No elementary quantum phenomenon is a phenomenon until it is a registered phenomenon. Reality at the quantum level doesn't exist in definite form until observed. But it gets more disturbing. The Weizmann Institute experiment I mentioned wasn't just about observing, it was about degrees of observation. They could tune how strongly they observed the particle's path. Strong observation, particles. Weak observation, waves. Turn the observation knob, and you literally turn the knob on what reality is. They published this in Nature in 1998, and the title of the paper was simple: Observing the Average Trajectories of Single Photons in a Two-Slit Interferometer. The data was undeniable. Observation doesn't just reveal reality. Observation determines reality. Now, the second pattern that makes this even more impossible to explain away. John Wheeler, one of the architects of quantum theory, proposed what he called the delayed choice experiment. The setup is deceptively simple. Send a photon toward a beam splitter, which gives it two possible paths. At the end of those paths, you can either leave them separate or combine them with another beam splitter. If you leave them separate, you measure which path the photon took, forcing it to behave as a particle. If you combine them, they can interfere, showing wave behavior. Here's the twist. You decide whether to combine the paths or leave them separate after the photon has already passed the first beam splitter. You make the choice when the photon is already committed to a path. According to classical logic, the photon must have already decided whether it's a particle taking one path or a wave taking both. But when physicists actually did this experiment, starting in the 1980s and refined through the 2000s, they found something impossible. The photon's behavior at the beginning of the experiment depends on what you choose to measure at the end. Choose to detect which path, and the photon acts like it took one path all along. Choose to look for interference, and it acts like it took both paths simultaneously, even though your choice happened after it supposedly made its decision. The photon's past behavior is determined by future observation. Physicist Alain Aspect, who won the Nobel Prize in 2022 for related work, performed some of the definitive delayed choice experiments. The results are unambiguous. What you choose to observe determines not just the present state of the particle, but retroactively determines what it was doing before you made that choice. Wheeler himself said, "We are participants in bringing into being not only the near and here, but the far away and long ago." Observation doesn't just collapse present reality. It reaches backward in time, determining what was real in the past. Physicist Anton Zeilinger, who shared that Nobel Prize with Aspect, put it more directly: "I am absolutely convinced that quantum mechanics forces us to a revision of our understanding of the role of observer, and maybe ultimately the role of consciousness. This isn't fringe. This is Nobel Prize-winning physics stating clearly, consciousness plays a fundamental role in what reality is." Quick note, if you're still watching this deep into the video, you're clearly someone who thinks deeply about reality. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We go deeper here consistently. And if you're noticing you understand this intellectually, but want help applying it in practice, I created something specific for that gap. It's called the manifestation path. Link in the description. Now back to what this really means. So we have the data. Observation collapses superposition. Observation retroactively determines past states. But here's the question physicists can't answer. What counts as observation? Is it just any physical interaction? If you replace the conscious observer with an automatic detector, does that count? The answer creates an impossible problem. If observation is just physical interaction, then particles are constantly interacting with air molecules, electromagnetic fields, cosmic radiation. Everything should be constantly observed, constantly collapsed. There should be no superposition, ever. But superposition exists. Particles maintain their wave-like behavior until measured by a detector. So what makes a detector's measurement special? The standard answer is decoherence. When a quantum system interacts with its environment in certain ways, the superposition becomes undetectable. But notice what this answer does. It shifts the question without answering it. Because decoherence doesn't explain when superposition actually ends. It explains when we can't detect it anymore. The wave function might still be there, just invisible to us. Physicist Eugene Wigner took this seriously and proposed something radical. Consciousness collapses the wave function. Until a conscious observer becomes aware of the measurement, the system remains in superposition, including the measuring device itself. This sounds absurd until you realize the alternative is equally absurd. that reality somehow knows the difference between a conscious detector and an unconscious one without consciousness playing any role. Or worse, that nothing is ever really definite until observed by a conscious being, meaning the entire universe before conscious life was somehow in superposition. Wigner later distanced himself from this view, calling it unsatisfying. But he couldn't offer a better answer, just dissatisfaction with the implications. Now let's connect this to something older. In the 18th century, philosopher George Berkeley proposed idealism, the view that reality is fundamentally mental, not material. He argued that objects only exist as perceptions in consciousness. His famous phrase, "To be is to be perceived," this was considered absurd by materialist philosophers. Samuel Johnson supposedly refuted it by kicking a rock and declaring, "I refute it thus," as if physical pain proves physical reality. But Berkeley wasn't saying rocks don't exist. He was saying they exist as ideas in consciousness, ultimately in the mind of God. The quantum observer effect is Berkeley's idealism emerging from mathematics. Particles exist in superposition, undefined and wave-like, until observed. To be definite is to be perceived. The rock exists when Johnson kicks it, because the act of kicking is observation. Neurons firing, consciousness registering sensation. Remove consciousness, and you're left with probability waves, not definite rocks. Physicist John Wheeler, again, proposed what he called the participatory universe. Reality is not something sitting out there, independent of observation. Reality emerges through the act of observation. He used the metaphor of 20 questions. In the normal game, one person thinks of something, and others ask yes or no questions to guess it. But Wheeler described a version where nobody thinks of anything at the start. Each person answering must be consistent with previous answers, but the thing itself only comes into being through the questions. The universe is like that. It doesn't have definite properties until observed. The questions, the observations, bring reality into being. Let me guide you through something right now. Observe your direct experience, not what you think about your experience, but the raw sensation of existing right now. Where is your experience located? You might say, in my head or in my body, but actually observe. Is there a sensation of redness when you see something red? Where is that redness located? Is it in the object? Is it in your eye? Is it in your brain? Can you find a place where the experience of redness actually is? Now try this. Try to find the boundary between you observing and the thing observed. When you see, where does the seeing happen? Not the physical mechanism, the light and neurons, but the actual experience of seeing. Can you find a subject separate from the object? Or is there just seeing, without a clear separation between seer and seen? This isn't just philosophy. This is investigating the structure of experience itself. And what you'll notice, if you look carefully, is that the observer and observed aren't as separate as they appear. Experience arises as an undivided whole, and the separation into subject and object is something we add afterward through interpretation. Physicist Wolfgang Pauli, who won the Nobel Prize for his work in quantum mechanics, spent years corresponding with psychologist Carl Jung about this exact problem. Pauli was convinced that quantum mechanics was pointing to something about consciousness that physics couldn't capture. He and Jung developed the concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, as a bridge between psyche and matter. Pauli wrote that the observer effect suggests the existence of a cosmic order independent of our choosing, but not independent of our consciousness. Reality has an order, but consciousness participates in manifesting that order. Philosopher of mind David Chalmers calls this the hard problem of consciousness. You can explain the brain's processing of information, the neural correlates of thought, all the mechanics. But you can't explain why there's something it feels like to be conscious. Why doesn't all that processing happen in the dark, with no inner experience? And the observer effect makes this problem harder, because it suggests consciousness isn't just an inexplicable phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that affects what's physically real. If observation collapses superposition, and observation requires consciousness, then consciousness is doing something physical. But consciousness can't be reduced to physics, because it's the thing that determines what's physical in the first place. Here's the deepest implication. Materialism says consciousness is what matter does when it gets complex enough. Neurons firing create thoughts. Thoughts are just brain states. But the observer effect reverses this. Matter, at the quantum level, doesn't have definite properties until observed. Observation requires consciousness. So consciousness can't be explained as an emergent property of matter, because matter's definite existence depends on consciousness being there to observe it. Philosopher Bernardo Kastrup calls this analytical idealism, the view that consciousness is fundamental and matter is what consciousness looks like from the outside. The brain doesn't create consciousness. The brain is what consciousness looks like when observed physically. You can't reduce consciousness to brain activity for the same reason you can't reduce the observer to the observed. The observer is what makes the observed definite in the first place. And now, we arrive at the heart of this. The observer effect isn't just weird physics. It's evidence that the materialist worldview, the idea that reality is fundamentally physical stuff independent of consciousness, is incompatible with our best science. Quantum mechanics forces us to choose. Either consciousness is fundamental and matter emerges from it, or we accept that reality doesn't exist in definite form until observed, which leaves us asking, observed by what? Let's gather the threads. The double-slit experiment shows that particles exist in superposition until observed, and observation changes them from waves to particles. The delayed choice experiment shows that observation retroactively determines what the particle was doing before observation. Wheeler's participatory universe proposes that reality emerges through the act of observation. Wigner's consciousness interpretation suggests that consciousness itself collapses the wave function. Berkeley's idealism, centuries earlier, said reality is fundamentally mental, and the hard problem of consciousness shows that subjective experience can't be reduced to physical processes. All of this points in one direction. Consciousness is not a product of matter. Matter, as we experience it, is a product of observation by consciousness. Now here's the revelation that changes everything. You are not a passive observer of reality. You are a participant in reality's emergence from possibility into actuality. Every moment, through the act of observation, you are collapsing infinite quantum possibilities into the definite reality you experience. This isn't metaphor. This is what the physics shows. When you observe, you don't just see what's there. You participate in making what's there definite. But most people never realize this. They live as if reality is fixed, and they're just moving through it. They observe unconsciously, reactively, automatically. They collapse the same patterns over and over because they're observing from the same state of consciousness repeatedly. The same thoughts, the same emotions, the same assumptions about what's possible. And so they collapse the same reality day after day, wondering why nothing changes. But what if you could observe differently? What if you could shift your state of consciousness and therefore shift what you collapse from possibility into reality? This is not mysticism. This is applied quantum physics. When you change your observation, you change what's observed. Physicist Henry Stapp spent decades working on the quantum mind hypothesis, the idea that consciousness uses quantum processes to influence physical reality. His work suggests that intention, the conscious direction of attention, affects quantum collapse in the brain, which then affects behavior and therefore affects the world. You are the observer collapsing reality from wave function to particle, and the state of the observer determines what gets collapsed. If you observe from fear, you collapse fear-consistent realities. If you observe from possibility, you collapse possibility-consistent realities. This isn't wishful thinking. This is recognizing that observation is not passive. Observation creates. The universe before conscious observation is radically different from the universe during conscious observation. And most radically, if consciousness is what collapses quantum superposition, then consciousness must be more fundamental than the matter it observes. The brain is not creating your consciousness. Your consciousness is collapsing the definite brain you experience. You are not in the universe. The universe, as definite experience, is in you. Physicist Amit Goswami puts it directly. Consciousness is the ground of being, not matter, consciousness. Matter is what consciousness looks like when observed from a limited perspective. The observer effect is terrifying to physicists because it destroys the foundation of scientific materialism. It reveals that the objective reality we assumed existed independently is actually dependent on observation. And observation ultimately requires consciousness. This doesn't make science invalid. It makes science a description of how consciousness experiences itself. And it means that you, as conscious observer, are far more powerful than you've been taught to believe. You are not just watching reality unfold. You are collapsing reality into being, moment by moment, through where you place your attention and from what state of consciousness you observe. There's a brutal difference between intellectually understanding that you collapse reality and actually living as someone who knows this. Most people watch videos like this, feel the insight, and 3 days later they're back to the same mental and emotional pattern as always. Why? Because knowledge without embodiment changes nothing. That's exactly the gap that led me to create the manifestation path. It's not a course. It's a structured process of identity reprogramming through 3 progressive workbooks and 28 days of guided daily practice. You'll identify and dismantle the autopilot, map who you are versus who you're becoming, and practice every day until the new identity is no longer effort, but naturalness. Neuroscience plus consciousness plus coherent action. It's not temporary motivation, it's structural change. Link in the description if you want the next insight to actually change how you exist. Here's what you can do right now. First practice. Spend 2 minutes today observing how you observe. Not what you observe, but the quality of your observation. Are you observing reactively, automatically labeling everything as good or bad? Or are you observing openly, allowing reality to be what it is before interpretation? Just notice the difference. Second practice. Choose one moment today where you consciously shift your state before observing. Before checking your phone, before entering a conversation, pause. Change your emotional state intentionally. Feel possibility instead of expectation. Then observe. Notice if what you observe shifts when you shift how you're observing. You've spent 25 minutes understanding that observation isn't passive. That consciousness collapses possibility into actuality. That you are not just in reality. Reality, as definite experience, emerges through you. The observer effect isn't just physics. It's the mechanism through which you participate in creating what's real. Most people will never know this. You do now. The question is what you do with it. If this fundamentally shifted how you see your role in reality, leave a like. It helps others find this. And drop a comment. What's one thing you're going to observe differently after watching this? Let me know. I'll see you in the next one.